My name is Akosia Chiabiasaki. I am your moderator, and I am happy to have you all on board. We're going to have quite an exciting interaction here. We're going to learn a lot, I believe. And I'll quickly go on to what I have on my agenda for this afternoon. I would be allowing in the director for SEGRAD UCC to welcome all of us, and she is in the person of Dr. Georgina Odrum. Aside being the director of the center, she's also a senior lecturer with the Department of Sociology and Anthropology here at the University of Cape Coast. She has published extensively in reputable journals and books, and her research interests are in gender and sexuality, marginalized youth, mixed race studies, popular culture, amongst others. So the platform is yours, Dr. Odrum, to welcome all of us.
Thank you very much, Akosi, and good afternoon to us all. Yes, so you are all welcome to the second edition of the SEGRAD webinar series, which is a monthly series of the Center for Gender Research, Advocacy and Documentation of the University of Cape Coast. It is a comparatively new program that we started. As the moderator said, this is the second of the version, and we are going to have it once every month. So hopefully we'll be seeing some of you in the month of November and also in the month of December for our series. Today's series focuses on gender, emotional intelligence, and then work ethics. We are aware that emotional intelligence is an evolving field. It is actually evolving just as artificial intelligence, but not many of us know what exactly it is. So SEGRAD took the opportunity to help us learn about this concept, but in relation to gender and how it impacts on our work culture or work ethics. So the question that we intend to look at this afternoon is, what exactly is emotional intelligence? How did it evolve? What is its focus? How gendered is it? Do men and women experience emotional intelligence differently? Does it impact on our world of work differently? These are some of the questions that our panelists, our two key speakers, will be helping us to digest this afternoon. We are really happy to have seasoned speakers in the field to take us through the subjects. Our first speaker will be Dr. Ikeria Chinwe Igbefe from the University of South Africa, UNISA, whom I've known for some time now. We met in Oxford in far back 2008 when we attended the conference together. And because we're all from the West African sub-region, we strike a relationship, and we're always talking and thinking about how we may impact on West Africa one day. So we are really happy that this afternoon, the 15th of October, SEGRAD through this webinar series has created a platform for us to share knowledge and also learn about this field. Eukaria, thanks so much for making time to be with us. I know it's been a difficult time because of other pressing family commitments, but you've still made time to be with us. We are really happy to see you. We are also grateful to our second speaker, who is in the person of Dr. Francis Ano of the University of Ghana. And Francis will be taking us through other aspects of emotional intelligence. Francis, we also met when we were both students at the University of Cambridge in the UK some time back. And whilst most students will stay back in the Western world, we decided to come back and help Mother Ghana. So Francis, thanks for availing yourself this afternoon to this series so that we learn from you on emotional intelligence. Actually, through this series, we see it as a platform for emerging scholars. There are scholars who are well established in their areas. There are also scholars who are quite growing or emerging in their areas. And then SEGRAD is creating this platform to help us get visibility, but also get established gradually. The platform through this webinar series is also to help showcase the center, gain visibility for the center, but also for the university, because the center is part of the University of Cape Coast. It also helps merge international partnership and relationship with other universities. Every seminar, we try to bring on board both local and international scholars to digest on the issue. So it is an opportunity to equally partner different universities and intensify the internationalization policy of the university. It's also a platform to help us demystify gender. What exactly is this gender? Not everyone is too comfortable with gender, but gender is cross-cutting and it cuts across all subjects. And that's why today we could look at gender from the perspective of emotional intelligence and then work ethics. We are very grateful to our provost, Professor Eric Amankando, for availing himself. He's a very, very busy person, and he's left so many meetings to be with us. And he's always been very supportive of the center's activities. Prof, we are happy and we welcome you to the session. We can't end this welcome address without recognizing the support of our dean, our coordinators for advocacy, outreach, and as well as research, our research fellows at the center, our administrative staff, our former directors and coordinators, our ICT personnel, but also our affiliates. Without them, this program will not run. Our moderator and attendees, we are really grateful to you for availing yourselves. What afternoon, and you had to make time to be with us. We appreciate your presence. We hope to learn from each other. Don't hesitate to share your views, ask questions, and clarify. We are going to take this seminar from a very basic or rudimentary level so that we learn about the concepts of emotional intelligence. Thanks to you all, and welcome to the second section. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Georgina Odro, for those words that you just gave us. Well, after Dr. Odro, I'll be taking a few words from the provost of the college. And before he comes in, I would quickly run by you how this program is going to run. I'm going to introduce our speakers right after our provost speaks. And then you'd also have the avenue to bring in questions if you have any for our resource persons to answer them. So that's how the program is going to go on. But before I introduce my speakers for the afternoon, I'm glad to extend a welcome to the Provost of the College of Humanities and Legal Studies of University of Cape Coast, Professor Francis Eric Amokwando. He is actually a professor of tourism. He is a Commonwealth Fellow of the United Nations Remote Sensing Training Educators and an alumnus of the Galilee International Management Institute in Israel. Now, he is also a member of the advisory board of the Takoradi Technical University. Prof, you're most welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll take the opportunity to welcome participants and especially our two speakers. You are welcome into UCC and our second edition of SEGRAD webinar series. UCC is a gender-sensitive university. As a result, the Center for Gender Research, Advocacy, and Documentation was set up to ensure that gender informs all the activities and decisions of this great institution. Although the center is a young one, I would say that it's an active center in my college, and I'm very happy to associate myself with this second edition of the webinar series. The topic for discussion today, gender, emotional intelligence, and work ethics, to me is a topical one and also timely, given the fast-changing world that we find ourselves, and also the COVID period. It becomes an important topic for discussion. And I hope that our speakers are going to enlighten us on this crucial subject matter. By the end, we expect that we will be aware of what emotional intelligence is, the drivers of emotional intelligence, the benefits, and what we can do to minimize stress and also challenges associated with COVID. I'm happy that our speakers are going to take us through the topic and also link it to work ethics, which relate to discipline and hard work. And so I hope this topic is going to enlighten us and empower us in our workplaces to do better. So on that note, I hope we are going to be active participants of this second edition series. And I welcome our speakers. Thank you for the opportunity given me.
Thank you very much, Prof, for those words. We're grateful for your time and for joining us for the second edition of the SEGRAD webinar series. We're most grateful for your time. So I'll quickly introduce our speakers for today. And first on our list, in no particular order actually, I have Dr. Eucharia Chinwe Igbefe. Dr. Igbefe is a researcher with the College of Human Sciences, Department of Psychology, University of South Africa, UNISA. Dr. Igbefe received her PhD in Emotional Intelligence from the University of Pretoria in South Africa. She also holds masters from the University of Southampton in the UK, and her research interests lie in the domains of emotional intelligence, leadership psychology, African indigenous psychology, and then students, educators support, as well as creating a balanced work culture and climate. She has published extensively and won a number of awards in the academy. Dr. Eucharia Igbefe, you're most welcome. Right, for my second speaker, I have Dr. Francis Anno, who is a senior lecturer at the Department of Psychology at the University of Ghana, Legon. He is the coordinator for the MPhil Sociology Psychology program. He holds MPhil and PhD degrees in social and developmental psychology from the University of Cambridge in the UK. He was a Bill Gates Scholar at Cambridge. His research interests include emotional intelligence, work-family interface, workplace violence, employee well-being, among others. He has published extensively in reputable international peer-reviewed journals. He's licensed by the Ghana Psychology Council, and he is also a member of the Ghana Psychological Association. He has a number of awards to his credit. Dr. Anno, you are also welcome. In beginning our discussion this afternoon, it has rightly been indicated, we're looking at gender, emotional intelligence, and work ethics. I'll begin with Dr. Eucharia Chinwe Igbefe. She's going to set this whole interaction we're going to have for us, and she's going to be speaking on what emotional intelligence itself is, what it aims at achieving, and then evolutions of this particular subject over the years. Dr. Igbefe, if you can hear me, we are going to listen to your presentation now.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you for giving me the opportunity. When we talk about emotional intelligence, I look at it from a different, simple context. When people ask me, what is emotional intelligence? I do tell them it's the ability to think, to see right, think right, act right with your emotions and emotions of other people. If you want to look at emotional intelligence from this perspective of seeing right, thinking right, and acting right, it becomes easier for any human to apply. Because what is seeing right? The concept of right means considering your emotion and my emotion and the emotions of everybody in any given environment. If you can identify your emotion, you can also identify the emotions of other people. And when you put this information together, you'll be able to think critically. And when you think critically, you must think with emotions. You have to use your rational brain. You have to use your emotional brain. Because when you use your rational brain without your emotional brain, you're going to act logically, and you are not going to show empathy. So in emotion, you must draw from the both sides, rational and emotional, to make objective decisions. When you are able to draw from your rational brain and from your emotional brain, you'll be able to act right. Right in the sense you must always consider other people. You must always remember that if you can feel pain, another person can feel pain. That is how I simplify the concept of emotional intelligence. It shows when you look at these three, think right, act right, and see right, it shows you have to have, there must be presence of self-awareness and social awareness. Self-awareness, your ability to know your strengths and your weaknesses. Social awareness, your ability to understand the emotions of people in any given environment that you are in. So that's my definition of emotional intelligence.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Igbefe. Can we look at what the whole subject of emotional intelligence tends to achieve? What are the aims of emotional intelligence if you're talking about it?
When the concept of emotional intelligence is based on the idea that no matter how intelligent an individual is, if that individual is not able to relate with others, work as a team, that individual will not be able to achieve more. And that organization will not be able to achieve more, whichever organization the individual is working. So the concept of emotional intelligence is to enable people to control their emotion, show empathy. Remember that in as much as they can feel anything, their colleagues in the office can feel the same. And when they strike that balance, they will be able to work with each other. So the concept of emotional intelligence is not only to control our emotions, but it is to create an emotional balanced environment in the sense that everybody can work. So in this sense, you say that an emotional intelligent person is an individual who is able to dictate the emotions in that environment, because emotion is a message. When people get angry, what is it that is making them angry in this work environment? Is it limited resources? Is it any other thing that is making them to react the way they react? So emotional intelligence is about creating a climate that is conducive for every person to live in, working without stress or reduce stress.
Right, Doc, now let's look at the whole idea of emotional intelligence and how it evolved. How did it start?
When I call it a movement, because first it was by a psychologist called Meyer, who decided with his colleagues to coin the concept emotional intelligence. Their idea is that emotion will help intelligence and intelligence will guide emotion. That's how the concept came about. And they believe that emotional intelligence will help individuals to think critically and reason intelligently. But after their work, Daniel Goleman, who was then an editor in a journal, popularized, we call it popularized, the concept of emotional intelligence. He is the one that made emotional intelligence known today. He is the one that radicalized the concept of emotional intelligence. So there are different types of ideas when you think of emotional intelligence. There are groups that said it's a cognitive skill. And this group said, oh, it's a brain skill. It's for people to think critically. But the flaws of this group is that people who think logically, they don't have emotion. They don't consider emotion in their behavior. If you are working with someone who thinks logically, the person is very objective. He doesn't care about the emotions of people. He wants things done. Even when colleagues are sick, he doesn't care. He follows the rules of the organization. Then there are people who said, no, you can't think logically all the time. We need to consider people's emotion. These are the group that came up with the concept non-cognitive emotional intelligence. This group said, no, we are going to bring skills, soft skills from different places, adaptability to make people adjust to this concept of emotional intelligence. That's how we come, that's why we have what we call non-cognitive emotional intelligence, meaning this is not about thinking logically. This is not about reasoning intelligently. It's about people trying to adjust in any environment that is stressful. Then Goleman came with his group of researchers after working through thousands of organizations. He is the first person that took emotional intelligence to organization, to workplace. Then he said, no, we are going to mix thinking reasonably and other soft skills so that we come up with something that is inclusive, because you can't do away with people who think logically. You can't do away with people who are very empathetic. So that's the movement of emotional intelligence. But now we are having new ideas of emotional intelligence. People who think that, no, we have had enough of this westernized emotional intelligence. What happens in African culture? Does it mean in Africa, our ancestors don't have emotional control? So these are the new group coming up. Now we are having another group that is saying, no, we have to integrate everything that has been done to come up with concepts that is more balanced, and we help people adjust, promote their well-being, reduce stress. So this has been the movement of emotional intelligence. And this, when you look at this movement, it's all about inclusive, making emotional intelligence good for whether you are a female or whether you are a male or whether you are others. Because the concept is changing. It's no longer male, female. We have male, female, and others. So when you bring this movement into the workplace, what are the activities? What are the behaviors? What are the attributes you expect from your workers? How do you allow them to navigate the challenges that will occur as they go through their work life? So that has been the movement of emotional intelligence.
Right. You were talking about looking at the fact that emotional intelligence is not reserved for, let's say, the female, the male, or the other, because of evolving trends. I want to find out, what is its gendered nature, looking at emotional intelligence?
It's all surrounded with controversy, because there's a research that said women are more emotional intelligent than men. There's a research coming up that no, there is none that is more. It depends on the individual. It depends on the skills of the individual. Remember, emotional intelligence is a learnable skill. So if a female learns the skill, that does not make her better than a male. Because if you give a male that same opportunity to learn the skill, he too will be better. So that idea of female being more emotional intelligent than men is when you look at it from mother perspective, empathy, compassion. But the world is evolving. We have fathers who are more dedicated than mothers. So the concept, the idea of female being more emotional, intelligent than men is no longer, I would say, it's no longer objective.
Okay, thank you very much. For those of us who are participating, you can send in your questions for Dr. Igbefe. If you have any, you can send them through the chat and I would pose the questions for you, even as I continue to engage here on our subject for today, gender, emotional intelligence, and work ethics. Doc, let me come back to you and find out, do you think that there is any kind of cultural relation to emotional intelligence? Do you think with emotional intelligence, culture plays a role in them?
Yes, a lot. And that's what I'm working on now, because when you go to our traditional society, we have top emotional control. And emotional control is what we perceive as emotional intelligence. And our ancestors, I will constantly use the term ancestors. Our ancestors play with emotions. When you look at our music and the concept of our music, the drummings, the instruments we use, when you look at the lyrics of our traditional songs, is either to motivate to war or to bring peace. It's either to calm a human being or to trigger an action. So when you look at everything that is done in our traditional society, is all embedded, that emotional intelligence is embedded in everything. And that's why in the traditional society, the warriors cannot go to war if their emotions are not triggered to see that there's need for war, to think that they are going to win this war, despite all challenges, and to behave in a way that will enable them to win the war. If you look at the beats, our traditional wears is all embedded in our emotions, the way we feel, the way our ancestors feel. If you look at our cultural values, it's all about the concept of emotional intelligence, because I do feel that when you look critically at the domains of emotional intelligence, the clusters of emotional intelligence, that has been what our ancestors promoted without stress. So you can remove emotional intelligence from African culture. And if we want to restore sanity to African culture, we have to bring back emotional intelligence. Studies are showing now that people that are going through mental stress, when you play their traditional songs, you trigger their ability to remember certain things they've forgotten. So my argument always is if we have these terms, if our music can motivate a child to walk 2 miles instead of a mile, if our songs in traditional society can make a child, a parent, a youth, an aged person to act to the benefit of the community, why can't we bring back all those best practices in our cultural society and use it to build a new concept of emotional intelligence? Because in South Africa, there are studies has been carried out. There are themes when you come to Western terminologies that you can't use in African society. So we can't say, okay, we are going to keep on promoting these concepts when we have our own. That's where I feel that universities should go back telling students to go back and research what is it in your society, in your cultural community that calms a person down when the person is angry. How do your ancestors navigate challenges? I do tell them, I said, like this COVID, I do ask students, what would our forefathers have done if they were here? So when you look at all these things, you see that you can't remove emotional intelligence from African culture. But we have to revive our cultural values that are in line with African culture. For example, empathy. In traditional society, we don't have orphans. We don't have children roaming about the street. We don't have unemployment. Do you know why? Because the moment a child loses someone, empathy is rekindled, and someone adopts the child. And the child never feels like, I'm alone. But look at what is happening in modern society. It's because there's no empathy again. And empathy is a key concept of emotional intelligence. You know, like, how can empathy is, it's not only wearing another person's shoe. No, you wear that person's shoe without losing your own shoe. I do define it as wear my shoe one leg, wear your shoe the other leg. Then you compare and see why you should show concern to another person. And in workplaces, there are no empathy. When you look at what is happening now, when you talk of rape, it's because there are no empathy. Because people don't teach again what we were taught in African society, African cultural society. Nobody talks about rejection. And this generation, we call them Generation Z, this new generation, they don't understand how to cope with rejection. When a female rejects a man, like we have in the context of where I am, the next thing is the man gangs up and rapes the girl. So I feel if we can revive our cultural values and norms and embed them, we will go far with emotional intelligence.
Right, Doc, thank you very much. Dr. Odro seems to agree with you on the fact that the idea of emotional intelligence is not far from the African culture. And she's also indicating that it's actually a repackaging of an African philosophy, that is the Ubuntu philosophy. Do you agree with her?
Yeah, you know, I have I do say when you look at Ghana culture, there are stories in traditional society that our grandmothers, our grandfathers do use to teach us emotional control, teach us emotional behavior, teach us relationship skills, self-management. There are those values. And when you talk of Ubuntu, I look at it from my own cultural West African concept. We call it live and let's live. When I say live and let's live, it means you create emotional balance environment for me. I create emotional balance environment for you. And we work together to achieve our goals. And productivity will be high because there's motivation, there's adaptability. Adaptability in the sense that when you see my weakness, when you understand my emotional vulnerabilities, you help me. And these are the concepts of Africa that is lost. The spirit of oneness is what emotional intelligence is all about. Where do oneness come from? That's how our forefathers lived.
Right. To clarify this, that actually came from Professor George Odro and not Dr. Georgina Odro. Actually, that was coming from Professor Odro. So it's the second webinar series of SEGRAT UCC, and we are looking at gender, emotional intelligence, and work ethics. And so far, we've had Dr. Eucharia Igbafe doing some talking or explaining issues pertaining to emotional intelligence and the fact that it's so much embedded in the African culture. And just as Dr. Odro put it, he says that it's a repackaging of an African philosophy that is coming back to us. And if you have any questions that you want Dr. Igbafe to answer, there's still time for you to bring them in before I move on to our second speaker for the day. Doc, before I allow you to go, is there any distinction between emotional intelligence and the evolving artificial intelligence?
To me, I do know, if you watch, I've been talking of controversies, you understand? I do not, sometimes I do not want to go into that controversy, you understand? Because I prefer to play on a balanced ground, because by the time you start this comparison, it becomes a problem. What I would have said, or what I will say is, what is the difference between emotional intelligence and emotional quotient? That's EQ and EI. Because when I read some write-up, I'm like, what are people confusing? Because when you look at emotional intelligence, it's a competence. Emotional EQ is measurement for EI.
Okay.
So I will prefer to focus on that than going into comparison, you understand? Because the AI people, they have their own terms that EI people are saying, no, it's not working like that. You understand? So I prefer to look at how do we make emotional intelligence work for us? How do we make emotional intelligence help people reduce stress, improve well-being, improve productivity, make good decision, relate with people, develop others, and create a sustainable work environment.
Okay. Right. So, Doc, again, I would want to put out this particular question, since you don't want us to be pegging two different things at each other, emotional intelligence and artificial intelligence. There is this group that believes that any individual without emotional intelligence cannot be termed as generally intelligent. Do you accept this?
No. But instead, you say that any individual without emotional intelligence will not have sustained discipline, sustained motivation, ability to navigate relationship in any social environment. Remember, in work organization, it's about, you can't function alone. It's about bonding, teamwork. If you don't have emotional intelligence, you will not be able to understand the people you are working with. You will not be able, you look at them as objects, not human. So what emotional intelligence does is that it humanizes an organization. It gives them that sense of being because you understand other people. You understand their pains. When you walk through that passage of your work environment and you look at your colleague, do you identify that this colleague is going through stress and still pretending? That's what emotional intelligence is all about. Caring, supportive.
Thank you very much, Dr. Igbefe. We have been listening to Dr. Eucharia Ikpefe, and she's been talking about what emotional intelligence is. And again, she has also been looking at issues regarding emotional intelligence, how it evolved, its aims, and how it can be used, to the benefits of all of us who have to relate it with each other. And I have seen a comment here, and it is coming from Eddie. And he says, I believe that in the African society, due to our orientation and socialization, women are more intelligent emotionally than men. Please, Doc, how do you react to that? I think Doc initially noted that she would not say that women are more emotionally intelligent than men, because there are men who are also showing these traits that previously we thought was reserved for women. And so she wouldn't want to say that women are better emotionally intelligent than men. I don't know if that's okay for you, Doctor.
I said something. I said in our traditional society, that mother concept, that motherhood, you understand?
Yeah.
In the traditional society, men are always out fighting for how to provide for the family. And the women are always at home, looking after the family. So because of that compassion women show, because of that love, supportive nature of women, it worked then. But when you look at it critically, you will say women are more emotional intelligent. I say they are emotional manipulative. Yes.
Yeah.
Can I give you an example?
Yes, please go ahead.
When a child does something, instead of a woman to discipline that child, he says, you know what, wait for your father. And when the father comes in, she goes to tell the story, pen the story. And when the father is beating that same child, the woman says, no, it's enough, it's enough. What are you trying to do? You understand the game? So I can't call it emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is, I want you to understand it. That's why I made it simple. When you see situations, how do you judge it? Considering how another person will feel. If you have emotions, another person has emotions. That's why I said, if you can feel pain, another person can feel pain. So how do we stop each other from feeling the pain so that we can live as one?
Right, Doc. So women are emotionally manipulative.
No, don't put it like that. I said in that olden days.
Yes.
Now it does not play that way, because women and men are involved in child care. We have supportive fathers. I call them supportive fathers, not house fathers. Like we have housewife. There are men now who don't go to work; they look after their kids.
Yeah.
You understand? So
Yes.
2 ways. I always say 2 ways. If you give a father opportunity, it's because we women, we are always there. If you give a father opportunity, you see that men are very supportive, very loving, very caring, and they contribute a lot. But because they are not always there, we feel that mothers put in a lot. But it's not easy.
Let me live within the African context. And Dr. Vincent Asanfo wants to find out, how come we have lost this?
Because that's why I'm a lover of African indigenous psychology. They were saying African psychology. I said no. I am putting African. The module I'm working on is African indigenous psychology. What I am doing there, I am going back to African roots to bring back those things that made Africa the person we are. That respect, that love, that caring, that supportive nature of Africa. that has been destroyed. That's why sometimes when I look at social media posting, I ask people, are you still an African? Because an African, let me give you a good example. An African will not say to an elderly person, an old man, you old man. It's an African. It's an African. So it's better we bring out those things that made Africa who we are. Live, let's live, irrespective of your age. Let's live. If you have an argument, present your argument. And I tell people, it has been bastardized when people say that in African culture, that when you tell a child, don't speak, that you are taking that child's freedom of speech. I said, no. What my grandparents told me is that when you are in argument or when you are presenting a case, they tell you, don't talk until you are asked to. What they are trying to teach you is the skill of active listening, the skill of argument, the skill of debate, because when you listen, you will be able to defend yourself. But when you don't listen, how can you defend yourself?
Right.
But because they wanted to destroy our African identity, they are telling us, no, you don't have to. So because they want to destroy our African identity, they're telling us no, that you don't have to, you don't tell a child, you don't tell anybody not to talk, you have to allow the person to talk. I said no. When they say don't talk, they are not trying to take away your right of speech. They are trying to teach you how to be an active listener so that you'll be able to defend yourself. You'll be able to listen to what the other person is saying, and you'll be able to make a good argument.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Eucharia Egbefe. It's been a pleasure having you, and the comments coming from our participants seems to be quite a long list that I have here, but then I would also want to allow Dr. Francis Arnold have a bite at the subjects that we are discussing this afternoon. So I would extend our appreciation to you. Thank you very much, Dr. Eucharia Egbefe, for your time. If you have your last words, you can put that in, and then I'll move on to Dr. Francis Arnold.
Okay, thanks a lot. Dr. Francis, I'm sorry, I'm going to take my leave because I'll be going to the airport, but I would like to listen to your ideas, and I will love to hear more from you. Thanks a lot.
You're most welcome. We're very grateful to you, Dr. Eucharia Egbefe, for your time. So I'm moving on to Dr. Francis Arnold. So the issue this afternoon is looking at gender, emotional intelligence, and work ethics. Dr. Eucharia Egbefe has gone through a great deal with us what emotional intelligence is. It'll be unfair on my part not to allow you also tell us what your impression of emotional intelligence is.
Thanks for having me. The concept of emotional intelligence is relatively new compared to general intelligence, which focuses on cognitive abilities. It was first introduced in the 1980s, specifically 1985, by a PhD student. He really did not develop or define the concept per se, but mentioned that in his thesis, it was part of his thesis title. It was two psychologists, John Mayer and Peter Salovey, who published some research on emotional intelligence in 1990 and defined the concept in academic literature for the first time. And they defined emotional intelligence as an ability, that is, an individual's ability to monitor his or her own emotions or feelings, to discriminate among them, and also use that information to guide thinking. Later, this definition was broadened by developing what they call a four-branch model of emotional intelligence. And here they argue that emotional intelligence involves four broad abilities. At the lowest level, we have perception of emotions, which involves being able to determine which information, which emotion an individual is experiencing at a particular point, and also the
Right.
emotions others are expressing. And this can be both vocal and nonverbal. And also being able to detect emotions even in music and art, and being able to distinguish genuine emotions from fake ones. So, for example, what does it mean if someone is giving you a fake smile? Just smiling for the sake of it. And how do you distinguish that fake smile from a genuine one? Next, the next ability associated with emotional intelligence is the ability to use emotions to facilitate thinking or problem solving. So it is believed that when we are sad, we tend to be more careful in our actions. Likewise, when we are happy, we tend to be more creative. So our understanding of this connection between emotional experiences and our actions can influence how we are able to harness our emotional resources in taking certain actions or decisions. And then the third branch is emotional understanding. This has to do with um, being able to appreciate what the causes or antecedents of emotional expressions are. So, for example, if you understand that taking an unfair action or an action that would be considered unfair is likely to result in anger, then you are likely to be more careful in that regard. Understanding emotion is also about being able to connect different emotions and see how they blend to form more complex emotions, and how individuals can transition from one emotional state to another. It all forms part of understanding emotions. And then the fourth ability relates to managing emotion, being able to have control over your own emotion, to come up with emotional regulation strategies, not just in yourself, but also in others. So that was the model they developed. But subsequently, this model was expanded on, as Ikeria mentioned, by um, Goldman. Goldman is a science journalist and a psychologist. So after learning about this work, he decided to um, go further with it. So he came up with 5 elements of emotional intelligence, which in brief include emotional self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills, being able to manage relationships. So broadly, that is what the concept of emotional intelligence is about. So for example, if you have gone to a funeral where people are expected to exhibit certain emotions, probably that is not the place you go and discuss lottery, especially with the person who is bereaved. I mean, tradition or the context demand that such discussions should be shelved for another day. So our understanding of emotions, how they are expressed, and even the context within which they are expressed is very important when it comes to managing relationships.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. No, for that insightful explanation on what emotional intelligence is to you. But then for the purposes of this discussion for you, you want to look at emotional intelligence and emotional labor. Now, could you let us understand what the difference between the two are?
Okay, to come to that, I will mention first work ethic, since that is what the main discussion is on. Work ethic broadly refer to or relate to diligence, ability to use time wisely, individuals' ability to delay gratification, and the general desire to work. Though I haven't come across any research specifically linking emotional intelligence to work ethic, there are other factors or constructs that are related to work ethic, which have been found to be influenced by emotional intelligence. So, for example, in the workplace, studies have shown that people who are high on emotional intelligence tend to perform better. In terms of leadership, people who are emotionally intelligent tend to exhibit more transformational leadership skills, which is considered more desirable compared to transactional leadership. So generally, studies suggest that emotional intelligence is beneficial for various workplace in terms of enhancing a number of workplace outcomes or organizational related outcomes. But specifically, moving on to emotional labor. Emotional intelligence has to do with our ability to understand our emotions and others' emotions, and how we can use this knowledge to guide decision making or our thought processes. Emotional labor, on the other hand, has to do with being able to suppress negative emotions so as to display emotions that are considered desirable within the work setting or the organization, what is called emotional display rules. Typical example is recently there was this Indian news presenter who was, I think, presenting, was it midday or evening news? And the news item was about an accident scene. Now, based on the details provided, she realized that one of the people involved was her own husband. So basically, she was reading or she was presenting news about the death of her husband live. Here, the natural emotion in you is or would be sadness. But then, as a news presenter, the expectation is that you smile to the cameras and appear cheerful. So she needed to compose herself, finish presenting the news, and right after presenting the news, she broke down. So the emotional labor involved in this is the fact that she had to suppress her emotion of sadness just to get the job done. We visit restaurants, we expect that the waiters and waitresses will smile to us, will be nice, but then they have their own issues. But they make attempt to suppress these emotions so that they can appear to be exhibiting emotions that are considered appropriate within the setting in which they work. So that is what emotional labor is. And there are two main strategies: what is called surface acting and deep acting. We can suppress our emotions just by faking. So I may not attempt to feel any kind of happiness within me, but just fake it. So I'll smile to a customer just to paint the appearance of being a nice person. But inwardly, it's a different emotion. Then we have deep acting, which involves making attempts to feel the kind of emotion I want to display. And these two different strategies have been found to have different effects in terms of organizational outcomes and even the individual.
Right, so let's look at the Ghanaian setting and the issue of emotional labor. How well are we able to handle this?
First, in terms of, to be able to handle emotional labor, we must understand what it is and what gives rise to it, which means that research is needed on what constitutes emotional labor in the Ghanaian setting. And as far as I know, not much has been done, but I'm aware of a few studies, some on journalists, because here did his PhD on that. Unfortunately, because it is relatively unknown in terms of training, employees hardly receive training on how to manage their emotions and suppress it. So we may be going through emotional intelligence, but in terms of, emotional labor, in terms of how to recover from that, to ensure that it doesn't have significant adverse impact, that kind of resource is lacking. So
Right.
it's something we see around, but in terms of how to handle it, there's a gap. That's what I would say.
Right. So when we're looking at the issue of emotional labor, does the issue of genuinity come into place? Because you're talking about the surface acting and then the deep one when it comes to emotional labor. So does it mean that the issue of you being genuine about the kind of emotions you're expressing at a particular point is really not important?
People can express or experience genuine emotion. So I like the work I'm doing at a particular point in time, and I'm happy about it. But then emotional labor here means there's a dissonance between your inward emotion, what you really feel, and the emotion you are expected to display. So you may be going through some issues which naturally should make you sad or happy or anxious. But then because, for example, for a preschool teacher, you could be pushed to the wall because of a child's misbehavior. But then you are expected to relate in a certain way to that child. So you try as much as possible to suppress your anger so that you don't display it. So a part of it, especially surface acting, is seen to be a form of deception.
Okay.
Because it involves exhibiting emotions or displaying emotions that the individual genuinely doesn't feel. Whereas in deep acting, efforts are made. So, for example, you can reflect on some positive experiences or see the positive side of the situation and try to induce that emotion within you so that in the end, the emotion you display is consistent with the emotion you are actually experiencing.
All right, so it's the second webinar series for the Center for Gender Research, Advocacy and Documentation of University of Cape Coast, and we're looking at gender, emotional intelligence, and work ethics. Doc, we have a number of messages here and quite a number of questions that you probably might have to attend to. Now, this is coming from Albert Nidodu. He says, in this technology and internet-driven age, how can educational institutions help young people develop emotional intelligence?
In the emotional intelligence literature, there's controversy on whether it is something that is innate, as in something we are born with, or whether it can be learned. Some people believe that it's a mix of different attributes, some of which are innate, others can be learned. So in actual fact, there are a number of organizations that organize emotional intelligence training programs to get people to become in tune with their emotion, to know when to act and how to act when they are experiencing certain emotions. So, for example, recently, just before the lockdown, there was this Premier League game, I think, between House of Folk and another team. Was it Kotoko? So, and there happened to be this professional boxer who I learned was angered by one of the supporters. Now, as a professional boxer, you are not expected to engage in street fight. So that knowledge of his professional ethics should have guided his decision. But then he decided to exchange blows. In fact, he actually beat the guy mercilessly. And I think he's been suspended for for some time. So yes, there are strategies that can be used to enable people to reflect more on their emotions so that we are able to think about the consequences of actions we take based on the emotions we feel. And personally, I've been caught up in that. I think I was playing a football match. It was when I was in graduate school, and I was a captain for my team. The referee was being unfair to us. And in protest, I took off my jersey and walked off. In professional football, well, this wasn't a professional football game, but in professional football, that would be a straight red card and possibly even some match suspension. So what it means is that sometimes you feel the urge based on the emotions you experience to take certain actions, but it's important to reflect on the likely consequence of that action. And in cognitive processing, information passes through the brain centers that process emotions or emotional information before they get to the part of the brain that process reflection. That is our ability to reflect on our actions. So it's very important to help people to manage their emotions. But here, there are only a few people who really do that. I know a few colleagues who organize emotional intelligence training programs for organizations. But in school settings, I'm not too sure about that. I don't think we have such resources.
Thank you very much. Doc, let me find out, does one's personality type have any bearing on the extent of one's emotional intelligence? My personality type, does it have any bearing on my emotional intelligence?
Actually, some scholars in this area have attempted to distinguish emotional intelligence from personality. So there are two different models, or we can even say three, of emotional intelligence. Some view that as strictly an ability that is distinct from personality, whereas others define emotional intelligence in such a way that it overlaps with personality. So studies or measures based on such definitions make it very difficult to really distinguish how much of the effect we find is due to personality and how much of it is due to emotional intelligence, and whether emotional intelligence as defined based on such conceptualizations is really distinct. And then there are those that view emotional intelligence as part of personality, more like at the lower level in terms of the definition of personality. So it depends on which model of emotional intelligence you want to apply. Some would argue that it's no different from personality. Others would argue it is distinct from personality. So
Right.
those that follow the ability model have found small to moderate correlation between emotional intelligence and personality. So then in that case, you would say that it's not influenced so much by personality.
Okay. Now, this is coming from Dr. Amina Al-Hassan, and then she is saying, listening to what emotional intelligence is, I think we should begin a process of including aspects of it in our school curriculum at all levels. Do you agree with her, Doc?
Yes, it's important. And in fact, there's this sad story I read about, I think, a JHS 3 student who is presently serving a jail sentence for manslaughter because they had a class exercise. He scored 0 and his friends started teasing him. He kept warning them to stop, but they wouldn't mind. And that angered him to the point that he took a drawing board and threw it. He missed the target, but the drawing board hit another student who happened to be his close friend. The boy was hospitalized and died the day after. Since he died as a result of the drawing board hitting him, the boy was arrested and he's now at the Nsawam prison. Perhaps if he had some training on how to manage his emotions, his anger at that moment, he would have maybe reflected a little bit on the consequences of his actions. Though he didn't mean it, but because he could not manage his emotions at that time, the action he took landed him where he is now.
Okay, Dr. Ano, you mentioned the fact that in our Ghanaian setting or within our culture setting, if somebody is bereaved and let's say we are at a funeral ground, it will not be the place for you to go and talk about lotto numbers and all that. But then Richard Yao Johnson is asking you, don't you think it is an emotionally intelligent way of trying to ease the pain of the other person who would be crying at that time?
Well, yes, at funerals, people engage the bereaved in some form of discussions as a way of lessening the person's pain or getting the person to reflect and see the other side of the situation. But it is normally done in such a way that the issues that are raised to help the person cope with their emotional experience are related. So they are not completely unrelated and said in a way that kind of trivialize the experience. So in as much as it is important to engage the person in a kind of discussion or conversation to distract or help the person cope with the experience, the discussion should be relevant to the person's experience. So the individual has lost a child, maybe it's even an only child. And you try to help the person to understand that, well, it's not the end of the world. You could have another or even cite another person's instance, which may even be worse than the person's experience, as a way of getting the person to reflect. Because often when people have such intense emotional experience, they become a bit narrowed in their cognition. So they see things in a very narrow or limited way and end up taking decisions that may not be helpful. And we see that in people who attempt suicide because they see everything as coming to an end. But that doesn't mean that engage in discussions that may be considered irrelevant. The person may even think you are teasing him or her.
Right. Doc, is there any striking similarity between emotional intelligence and anger management?
Anger management skills are part of emotional intelligence.
Okay.
Because emotional intelligence is about being aware of your emotions and having strategies to control your emotions, and not just your emotions, other people's emotions as well. So anger management is part of emotional intelligence.
Okay, now this question is also coming in to you, Doc, and it says that our human behavior is really rational. So I think understanding the role of our irrationality is a powerful emotive device. Dr. Ano.
I don't get the person's point clearly. So unfortunately, because
from what I'm reading, he says that it is different. I mean, we are irrational human beings. Human beings are really rational. So how do you come up with this emotional intelligence you're talking about in such situations?
Well, actually, emotions were once thought to be irrational experiences, things we have no, impulses that needed to be controlled. But then decades of research have shown that emotions are not always irrational and that they can be used to guide thinking and action. And emotions, as we know, can be helpful in terms of, or they even guide the actions we take. For example, when we have the emotion of happiness, it prepares us for the action to approach the individual. So yes, we may behave in ways that sometimes may be considered irrational, but emotions can be managed in such a way that they can guide thought.
Right. Dr. Ano, we'll be rounding up pretty shortly. And I'm just going through so many questions here. Unfortunately, we might not have all the time to answer all of them, but I'm sure that with the explanations that Dr. Ano has given so far, those of us who've posed so many questions, I'm sure at the end of the day we'll be satisfied with the kind of education that we have all received on this platform. Now, Dr. Shaibu Mutaru is asking, can we draw any link between witchcraft accusations and victimizations on one hand and emotional intelligence and anger on the other?
Okay, one aspect of emotional intelligence is empathy. Trying to understand how other people feel. And when I saw the video that popped up recently, where this young woman was beating the old woman, you could see clearly that this person lacked empathy, could not understand what it means to go through certain experiences at that age. So lack of empathy, which forms or which is considered an aspect of emotional intelligence, results in that. And personally, I have done a study on vigilantism. And quite a number of the victims were accused of witchcraft, and many of them were killed instantly, and some of them even burned. But when you read the narrative, you see clearly that these people, or the perpetrators, did not understand the experiences of the individuals. And one that happened at Medina, this was a woman who had dementia and also had cervical prolapse. So they thought the protruding cervix was a penis. So they saw her as hermaphrodite or a female, but she wasn't. This was a woman who was having some reproductive problems or reproductive health problems, but because of lack of understanding of her situation, the perpetrators or the people gathered there nearly later. It took the intervention of a few people around who came to save the woman. Otherwise, she would have been added to the numbers of people who became unfortunate victims of instances like that. Yes, so I think we can draw some connection between the two. I've seen one of the questions. Yet, I think the whole idea of emotional intelligence has been seen as a Western thing, a Western concept, and people are asking questions as what emotional intelligence means from one context to another. So yes, context matters. It depends on the kind of relationship you have with the individual concerned and whether the person generally will tolerate this kind of discussion. So emotional intelligence is not just about yourself, but also trying to understand the other person so that you know what to say, what will lead to an unpleasant response or reaction from the person.
Right. Dr. Ano, I'm so grateful. And he was actually responding to a question that came in from Professor Odro. And he was saying that relating to your response to the bereaved and Lotto scenario, don't you think context matters here? Where the bereaved is an extreme fan of lottery, he believes that Lotto discussion is the best emotional diversionary strategy. And that was Professor Odro's question to Dr. Ano that he just answered. So at this point, we would be rounding up and I would be allowing in Dr. Udru, and she is the director for SECRAT, to give her final words.
Okay. Am I allowed to keep this in quickly?
Please do, please do, please do.
Okay, because I think somebody asked a question on how emotional intelligence is measured.
Exactly, exactly.
There are basically three main approaches. One is to get people to perform actions or activities that require, for example, identifying the kind of emotions being expressed on faces and what might have led to that emotion. And then there are measures that require individuals to report, to self-report on their levels of emotional intelligence. And often people are not accurate when it comes to identifying their own emotions and that of others. So issues have been raised about self-reports. And the third strategy is to get others, so other reports. So for example, your supervisor reporting on your emotional intelligence. So these are broadly the three main strategies used, but there are a lot of measures available, some very complex, others easy to administer, that are used to measure emotional intelligence.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ano. I mean, I have a lot of questions here, but unfortunately, our time has run out. It's quite unfortunate. There has been an interesting discussion that we've had. So the floor is now yours, Dr. Udru, to give us your closing remarks.
Wow, what an afternoon.
Yeah.
What an afternoon, yes. It's so obvious that we could have continued with this discussion, looking at the questions coming up, looking at the active participation. We can't thank our attendees enough. We can't thank our panelists enough. It's been a real learning experience for us. And listening to Eucharia, she actually took us to the terrain or the domain of emotional intelligence and African culture. Reading around the subject, I was asking myself, how does culture relate to emotional intelligence? And then though this program is being hosted by the Gender Center, we realized that we sort of didn't focus so much on gender, because per the discussion, women, per their nature, per their biology, per their physiology, has some emotional advantage over men. So we decided to sort of digress a bit, but then we tried and related it to the world of work. It's been a very insightful educational opportunity. And our attendees, you are welcome to bring in topics that you want to learn about. Like we said, it is an evolving area. We all experience it listening to the discussion in the African culture, what we do, music, in all domains of life, we've been experiencing emotional intelligence, but maybe we had not labeled it emotional intelligence. This afternoon, our panelists have helped us to gain that kind of knowledge on that. It's also obvious per the submissions from our participants that emotional intelligence needs to be taken on board in our socialization, in our parenting. It also needs to be incorporated into our curriculum. So it's something that we need to all look at. And the connection from Dr. Ano regarding emotional intelligence and emotional labor, I had a conversation with a pastor friend who said, can you imagine in a day as a pastor, when I go naming a child, I need to celebrate with the family. When I move to the funeral grounds on the same day, I need to grieve with the family. And then when I move into a wedding scene, I also need to identify with that family. So there are some professions where emotional labor may be more demanding than others. And we've learned about it this afternoon. The air hostess, whether she has or he has problems, need to be pleasant to the person on board the plane. The waitress need to accommodate. When the chef is delaying the food in the kitchen and the customer is really angry at the waitress, why is my food delaying? He or she had to manage and accommodate the situation. Through this afternoon, we've learned all the linkages between emotional intelligence, gender, and then work ethics. We could have exhausted this topic, but time didn't allow us. But we appreciate the contributions of all. We appreciate the contribution of our moderator, our two panelists. Eucharia was really rushing to the airport, for which reason she couldn't stay on for more questioning and answer, but she still managed to, and she took us to a different terrain altogether regarding the African scenario. And then our participants, you've been very, very active. We appreciate all of you. We can't thank you enough. Our ICT personnel, our administrative staff here behind the scenes, our research fellows, the research that went into this and all that. Hopefully, next month, we look forward to seeing you again. And in November, we are going to look at women in politics, looking at their achievements, some of the setbacks, and then the possible experiences they are having. So in November, you'll be invited to come and then together learn about this topic. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Thank you, Madam Moderator. I hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Doc. I see Professor Mukwanda unmuting his mic. I don't know whether he wants to chip in something. He is a provost for the College of Humanities and Legal Studies.
I forgot to mention him again.
Prof, Doc wants to say thank you.
Hey, thank you for the opportunity. I think it has been an insightful presentation. We are going out as enlightening people on emotional intelligence. And I hope the message that we are taking away from Dr. Francis Annor is that our world and our workplaces will be a better place if we are able to manage our emotions. I think it's something that we have to take home. And also from the first presenter, the emotional intelligence is not new. In Africa, it's embedded in our culture, our communal life, our socialization. We are socialized to be emotional attached to almost everyone in the society. So it's something, we have something good, and we need to go back to our roots. Sankofa is a word and a message to all of us. On that note, I would like to thank our speakers, the participants. You have been very active participants, very energetic, asking thought-provoking questions. Our moderator, we thank you for managing and directing the process successfully. And we hope that we can always count on you. So thank you for the opportunity to join this very useful session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. And that's how we're going to wrap up. I can't go without saying this. Felicity Senna says, oh, we want more. Unfortunately, I can't give you more. And then Richard Yao Johnson says, women in politics is a great thing in this dispensation. Can't wait for it. And I can't wait to meet you again next month for this interesting discussion. My name has been Akosua Chinyabia-Sackey. I have been your moderator. I look forward to meeting you all again next month for Women in Politics. Please enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much for being a part of this.
Thank you.